Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining. My name is Tracy Cook, and I'm with the Online Media Manager for ModernAnalyst.com, the premier community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled The Business Analyst and Strategic Thinking. Today's featured speaker is Steve Blaise, a PMP, PMI, PBA, author, consultant, teacher, and coach who has nearly 50 years experience in information technologies. Today's webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, including the question and answer session at the end. So please be sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature of the GoToWebinar software. I'd like to say thank you to High Gear for sponsoring this event. And at this time, I will turn it over to Vaughn Thurman to say a few words before we get started.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to sponsor this event. We're very excited about the alignment between High Gear's focus on business analysts and Steve's presentation and thinking in general in this marketplace. We're a solution that's focused on empowering business analysts to go from being a cog in the machine to the entire machine for a particular class of solution. We're all about empowering them through visual tools to do rapid solution development and deployment that deliver enterprise-grade platform capabilities in the area of process and work and workflow. We provide the tiers, the security, and the necessary tools for developing forms, flows, analytics, and continuous agile updates to improve the way a business functions. If you could give me the next slide, please. I wanted to also point out that this is a solution that's tried and tested and proven in a variety of industries. Most of them have in common, though, they're highly regulated or compliance driven. They've got people looking over their shoulders that want to see that things were done well. And we provide the necessary capabilities and scalability to address the requirements in those specific organizations. Again, very excited about the opportunity to sponsor this event today and look forward to hearing Steve's presentation.
Welcome, everyone. And we are going to talk about strategic thinking. And you say, well, what is strategic thinking, and what does that have to do with me as a business analyst? Why would I be worried about strategic thinking? When you think about strategic thinking, I mean, your thoughts are immediately on upper level management, the deep carpets, the guys up there thinking about what's going to happen in 5 years and mergers and acquisitions and all that kind of strategic stuff. But really, when you are planning your next step in your career, or you're even planning where you're going to go for a vacation, you are using strategic thinking. It's all about goal realization. We define a goal. I want to go there for my vacation. Now, how am I going to get there? That's strategic thinking. So, well, let's kind of put it into context for BAs. You immediately think of the upper level management, and that's because that's where strategic thinking starts. And let's face it, that's what strategic thinking is kind of like all about. It starts off with the mission, something all organizations have as a mission, something that they want to accomplish by being in business. This is something that continues for pretty much the life of the organization. Then you have strategies, strategic goals. And these are usually defined and then redefined on a periodic basis. And each one of these strategic goals is something to be accomplished that will lead to a successful completion of the mission. They're held as something to achieve for just as long as necessary until the goal is actually achieved, or, hey, maybe we don't need that goal anymore. Let's change it and do something different. Then we have strategies, one or more strategies for each goal. How are we going to go about achieving that goal? What are we going to do? Now, the strategies may extend for months, years, decades. They're contained within projects and programs, portfolios, pretty much connecting the strategic goal to the projects. Many projects Each project is aligned with one or more strategic goal through that stated strategy. These are the tactics, short-term, finite efforts to complete some part of the overall strategy. And well, you say, okay, well, who does all this stuff? Isn't that all kind of executive level? Well, certainly the executives are involved with establishing what the mission is and the strategic goals and perhaps some of the strategies themselves. Once we get the strategic goals, we have upper and mid-level management to create the strategies through those programs and the portfolios. And then you have your project managers and your teams. And if you're agile, you have a product owner and a set of developers. And the business analyst, where's that business analyst fit in? Down there. A member of the tactical team working specifically on one given project to solve one given problem. Now you look at that and say, well, okay, that's cool. So, where's the strategic thinking for us? Well, consider this, that even at the tactical level, we have to ensure that the project does not go off track, that it remains true to the strategy for which it was created, and ultimately to the overall strategic goal. Now, the project manager is focused on getting the project done on time, within budget, and fully featured. The team is focused on getting whatever the next activity is done, and if it's agile, what's going to be happening in the next 2-week sprint. Mid and upper level management and executives are kind of moving on to other areas and other strategies and into to mergers and acquisitions and all that other stuff. They're not involved with the tactics. So just who is going to be connecting the strategies to those projects? Who's going to make sure that we work on those strategies? Well, the business analyst is the member of the team most closely associated with the business. After all, we're the only ones with business in our first name. We are the customer-facing member of the solution team. We are the customer representative to the solution team. That makes us the most likely candidate to ensure that the business strategy is achieved. The business goal is satisfied. From that perspective, the business analyst must be prepared to think strategically and demonstrate that strategic thinking on a consistent basis. Cool. Hey, that's not bad. Hey, I can do that. Look at where I'm sitting, way up there, man. I'm up with the big guys there. I'm a strategy person. But wait a minute, what does that mean? What is strategic thinking anyway? Well, it's thinking over time, thinking ahead, thinking hypothetically, thinking what is going to happen. It involves risk analysis and threat assessment. Not just what is happening today over the next 2-week sprint, but when it all gets put together, what do we have? Are we going to solve that problem? And if so, when? And what is it going to look like when we do? In other words, from the tactical perspective, you as a business analyst and the team and the project manager or product owner or whoever, you are making sure that this project is done right, that the job is done right. From a strategic perspective, someone has to make sure that we are in fact doing the right job. Nothing is more frustrating than solving a problem and finding out that wasn't this problem we should have solved. So what do you need to be a strategic thinker? You need a mindset. You have to be comfortable working, for example, with ambiguity. We get a long-term way of looking at things. We think about tomorrow and next month and next year. Just as the project managers are told, you've got to look ahead, you've got to be in the next stage. While your team is writing code, you're setting up the testing environment to do the testing. If you're still involved with the code writing, you're fighting fires, and that's not very exciting. That's not a lot of fun. You want to think ahead. It's uncertain. Well, let's face it, we like certainty. We want things to be certain. We want to know that the sun's going to come up and then it's going to go down and all that. A strategic thinker abandons that certainty. They live in the world of uncertainty because, well, let's face it, you can't predict and be certain about the future. Strategic thinkers look at various different alternate methods for achieving a particular goal. They live with ambiguity. They delay decision-making until as late as possible. They get into a zone that is very uncomfortable. Strategic thinkers always deal with incomplete things because, well, once it's complete, it's over, or you're in the tactical area. You're no longer thinking strategically. And when you're dealing with the future, you know, it's a little difficult to try to think sequentially and linearly. And that requires us to be a non-linear thinker. Now, all of these things are not things that you're born with. Hey, I'm a born strategic thinker. I'm a born tactician. You know, I can't switch. All of these can be learned and you can teach them yourselves. How can you do that? Well, here are some elements, not too difficult. First of all, you want to make sure that whatever project you're working on, whatever part of that project you're working on, whether it's defining a single user story or a set of requirements, or defining an entire process, that it is aligned with some corporate goal, some mission up there. It's aligned with the overall corporate strategies. You can trace it and say, yes, we're doing this because of this. Now, as you'll see, this is quite important, and it's going to help a lot coming down the line with the everyday work that you have to do. We're going to be goal-oriented. We're going to define the problem, not just a problem, but the real problem we need to solve. And we're going to define a vision. What does the world look like when that problem is solved? It's going to be fact-based. Our thinking is based on facts, not on opinions, not on assumptions, not on ideas, but on facts. We base the future on the facts that we have today. It's going to be broad thinking, wide thinking, rather than deep. You can't get too deep about something that is going to be projected to occur 5 years from now. In fact, as the studies have shown, we as human beings are just not all that good in projecting the future. We can't even think very well about the future. There are cultures in the world today that don't have future tense in their languages. Their language is all present tense. They can't talk about the future. They can't see the future because there are no words to express it. We have a psychological mindset. We can't really see the future. We can project. You probably could project where you're going to be later on today, tomorrow, this weekend. But as you get out to about a fortnight, approximately 2 weeks, our ability to project the future becomes very small. So we're going to be thinking more broad-based and not get too detailed. That's difficult many times for those of us who come up through the programming ranks. It's going to be focused, what we call intent focused, rather than laser thinking point solutions, which are viable tactical approaches. We're going to be long-term focused, focused on achieving a goal. Strategic thinking must be shared or communicated with everybody else, everyone who is involved with creating or achieving the goals. The strategic thinker must be able to infect the team and management with this vision of the goal and the certainty that that goal will be achieved. And of course, whatever that strategy happens to be, whatever that goal is you're going for, it's got to be doable. Goals must be achievable and strategies must be implementable. Now, you say, well, that's cool. Okay, yeah, that's neat. But hey, I'm a business analyst, or I'm a project manager for this project. I don't have authority to make strategic decisions. How can I be a strategic thinker? What for? Well, at the strategy level, at all levels, strategic thinking is just the start. What happens when you do strategic thinking is you're not making decisions. What you're doing is generating options. You're thinking about what is going on and what are the possibilities. What might happen? Who might win the tournament? Who might win the most golds in the Olympics if you want to move to other areas? What the next contract might be? What are the options? And if this happens, what are the options that we can do then? Those options are then go feed decision making, specifically strategic decision making. Decision making makes, well, obviously, decisions. Those decisions then result in strategic planning. And the result of strategic planning are plans, right? We're not going to be fancy here. Once the plans have been adopted at a strategic level, they are managed at a strategic level as well. This generates the actions, and that's where you get to the tactics. Now, managing at a strategic level does not always mean that we will be successful in achieving our goals, so then we can apply strategic thinking to the results, comparing the results with our initial strategic thoughts. We have to look at those choices, modify our plans, modify our actions to meet the strategic goals, or we change the strategic goals in light of the realities of the actions we have already taken. So what are the strategic thinking specifically? Let's find out what they are. 5 areas. Each of these is something that you can perfect on your own, become more of. Systems perspective, system thinking. We're actually going to have a webinar on system thinking later on this year. Refers to the ability to be able to understand the other implications of any action that's being taken. Not just this particular project, but all other aspects of the problem domain, the conditions and that are set up that problem. What other areas might have that similar set of problems, similar conditions, similar environment? Intent focus means that we're more determined. We're focused on the problem, the specific problem, the problem we really have to solve. And we're not going to be misdirected by other things such as politics, for example. Thinking time, we may be able to hold past, present, and future in mind at the same time to create better decision making. Hypothesis-driven means that we can ensure that both creative and critical thinking are incorporated into strategy making. We're going to ask the what if questions. We're not afraid to imagine different options. And most of all, we're not afraid to fail when one hypothesis is proven not to be successful. And intelligent opportunism, which means being responsive to good opportunities. So let's see how each of these play with you as a business analyst or project manager. A strategic thinker has a mental model, refers to being able to understand the implications of the strategic actions you're taking. So as an example, it's a business analyst who sees the whole problem domain in which that user's problem exists. You understand that problems don't exist by themselves for this one simple project, that anything that you do here is going to have some kind of effect someplace else. You define the environment, the circumstances, and the conditions which cause the problem to get a more system, big picture view. Intent focus allows us within the individual to marshal our energy, to provide discipline. And so the example here would be, we see the real problem. We interview a whole bunch of people and we discover that the problem we were given to solve is not the real problem that needs to be solved. It may just be a symptom. It may be just a part of the problem. It may be somebody's view of the problem and not the real problem. So we're going to sift through it all and come up with a real problem and then look at the best solution from all of the possible solutions we could possibly come up with, and we're going to make sure that we get a whole lot of solutions. And we're always going to be considering the long-term implications, which is thinking in time. If you are solving today's problems today, you are thinking tactically. You can't really solve tomorrow's problems today, but you can solve today's problem based on today's facts. You need to do that. However, you need to be looking ahead. So a business analyst who says, hey, a decision that this client is making to implement this new change is just not going to work for these people. They've got to live with it, and they aren't going to be able to do it. So we need a phased approach instead. When back years ago, I had my accounts with Nations Bank, and Nations Bank up in Washington, D.C. was bought by the Bank of America. And within a month or two after they bought it, all of the signage and the paperwork and the letterhead, everything was changed over to Bank America. Year or two later, I moved down to Florida. I'm looking for Bank America and I see Nations Bank. And I think, oh, that's interesting. So Nations Bank, they didn't buy this Nations Bank, but I couldn't find a Bank America. So I went into the Nations Bank and said, hey, where we were, the Bank America bought Nations Bank. And they said, yes, that's true. They did here as well. We are Bank of America. It's 2 years since this happened. Yes, I know. Well, there are a lot of older people down here who don't change very easily. So we're taking our time and making a very slow change so that they're able to absorb the change better. And we don't have a lot of confusion going on. So we're doing it little at a time. It took them 3 to 4 years to move all of the Nations banks and another bank they bought, Barstow, to become Bank America. And eventually they did. It was successful. Washington, D.C. did it in a matter of months. Florida, a matter of years. Good business analysts looking at thinking in time, a strategic choice. Hypothesis driven says we're going to ask what if, what could happen? How might we do this? What's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? So we're going to be creative. We're going to be persistent. We're going to come up with many solutions instead of one because there may be multiple different hypotheses. We need the discipline and analytical skills to evaluate all of those solutions, not just eliminate them immediately. And we need the courage to accept failure, because if I come up with 12 solutions, 11 of them are not going to be working. Intelligent opportunism sounds, opportunistic sounds a little bit negative, but this is a positive thing. We're looking to see what else we can do with what we have. Reuse type of thing. So we see the potential application of this particular solution here. We can apply it someplace else in the organization. We can turn a customized effort we do for this company into a standard for a whole brand new market. It's business analysts who see that. Remember, the project managers are making sure that the product works. We're making sure that it works in the bigger way. So here's the model. There's the big picture, and that is our system perspective. Contextual orientation, that's our intelligent opportunism. How does it work within that particular context? Solution-based thinking is our hypothesis-driven approach. Long-term focused, of course, would be thinking in time. And the paradigm shift that moves you out of your comfort zone is intent-focused. Here's the picture. The big picture is where we are now. The environment, the conditions, the situation in which the problem exists. The other big picture on the right-hand side is where we want to be. The vision of what the world looks like when the problem is solved. Once we have that in mind and we keep it in mind, Put it up on the wall on a flip chart page, mark it up on the whiteboard. Then it becomes a lot easier to get through all of the obstacles, or in Agile, the impediments, things that will come up. Overcome them because we have the big picture in mind, and the decisions we make at the project level become a whole lot easier. So what is this going to do for your team and yourself? You're going to be able to get the entire team thinking more about the overall goals rather than what they have to do for tomorrow. You can get consensus so that they're involved. Remember that people are more committed to goals and strategies and getting the work done if they're part of creating those goals and strategies. As they say, that you show people pictures of a party, the only ones they're really interested in are the ones where they appear in the picture. We want a link between today's activities and what we're doing and the future. We don't want to just do stuff and say, I don't know why I'm doing this. We want to ensure that all decisions take future consequences in hand. We want to keep the team from getting too bogged down in day-to-day activities by helping them determine what is important to achieve the goals, from getting away from a tactical distraction and more focused on the overall goal that we're trying to achieve. And we want to enable the team to define and redefine its overall approach, a continuing reminder that there is more to the project than just meeting the next milestone or deadline, and a bigger issue. And that bigger issue is the zombie project. As it says there, it's a project that never ends. It fails to fulfill their overall promise to reach the goals, and it just keeps shuffling along, sucking up resources without any real hope of having any meaningful impact anywhere. It's something that I have been involved with, and nobody wants to kill a zombie project because, you know, hey, if I'm the project manager and the project is terminated, what happens to me as a project manager? What about the team? Not all projects are necessarily zombie projects, but many projects take on the characteristics of a zombie project. The morale of the team drops. Team members tend to go through the motions without interest. There are more questions about why we are doing what we are doing rather than how can we do it better, and so forth. And you might have been part of that, especially as the morale drops. You might call it encroaching zombieism. Well, there are two levels of good news for strategic thinking that combats zombie projects. One is that by focusing on the overall goal, the team gets reinvigorated with a sense of this thing that we have to achieve. We've got to get down the field and across the goal line. They have a vision of the world, of what the problem is solved. They take the steps to get there. Or the other side is you may end up taking the appropriate steps to terminate the project without prejudice, so that all the members of the team can then turn their resources to projects that are more beneficial and rewarding. Well, be careful though about strategic thinking. We don't want to think about only that one thing that we're doing, the laser-like focus on that one thing. We want to look below the surface, see the whole picture. We don't want to stop too soon. Take the first solution and run with that. We want to make sure that we look at all the alternate solutions. We want to make sure that we ask what-if questions. How might we do this? What might happen tomorrow? Yeah, we're going to go on a picnic, but what if it rains? We're not going to be satisfied with the status quo. We're always going to be looking for alternate ways of doing things better. We don't want to lose sight of that overall goal. We don't want to end up fighting the alligators instead of draining the swamp. Now, we don't want to rely on opinions and anecdotal information, not because we don't trust the information or we consider that the information may be erroneous, but because the people who render that information are usually responding to the immediate problem without any regard to the overall impact and effect of the solution. We want everybody to think strategically. And we want to remember that as human beings, we do have that trouble recognizing the future and seeing it. We want to take that into consideration. Some of the best practices: understand the environment, understand the conditions, Understand the real problem to be solved. Look at the forest, step back, take a breath, remove yourself from the travails and the details of the project and look at the big picture. Create and maintain a vision of what the world looks like without the problem. Create a scenario. This is happening and that's happening, the other thing is happening. And then take that vision and make sure everybody who's participating, anybody who has a connection at all with what you're doing, sees it and feels it with you. Make sure that you get feedback all the way along so that you can make changes to the strategy or even the strategic goal when it no longer applies. Anticipate challenges, problems, obstacles. Use hypothesis thinking to come up with risks and potential issues, as well as alternate ways of surmounting those risks and potential issues. Always keep an open mind about the future. Never assume that the worst could happen or the best could happen. And always make sure your actions align with the overall goals and strategies. So tips to start looking like you're thinking strategically. When your management says some news from your management or your client, how does this impact the project I'm on? When they keep a vision of success, what does the world look like when the problem is solved? How can I present the solution so that it is believable and achievable? How does my project align with strategies? Are we really doing the right things? So here's your business analyst. You understand the overall mission and strategic goals to be achieved. You're aware of the conditions, the environment, the situation, and the problem to be solved. You can visualize the results. By applying strategic thinking, you can provide that tactical product and execution corrections to move toward the strategic goal. You can suggest adjustments to the project and goal as necessary, and you can emphasize the vision to create excitement and increase motivation. You're going to make sure everybody keeps their eyes on the prize because you can only achieve the goals that you can actually see. And with that, I'll turn us back to high gear. And Vaughn.
Yep. Sorry, just having a little bit of trouble getting the camera on there. Steve, I think that was terrific. I was taking a lot of notes here, and one that made me chuckle was when you used the phrase fortnight. Having spent a little bit of time with clients in the UK, the first time I heard it, I had no idea what they meant. They had to explain to me it was a 2-week gap, and then I began using the phrase, and my kids all thought I was talking about a video game. So it just shows that the vernacular, right, and that's a business analyst topic, the vernacular of the room that you're in can have a lot of impact over what people perceive the meaning to be. But I think it was a great presentation, setting up doing the right job versus doing the job right versus doing the right job kind of reminds me of the lean manufacturing principle of going to the Gemba. One of the things that Chrysler did very well during its positive period was empowering the people on the factory floor to identify the challenges that they had. And so, what high gear is really good at solving is addressing this HR gap that exists in the world right now that I think has a lot of BAs feeling like they're playing monkey in the middle, that they get requirements from stakeholders, they develop them into beautiful documents, but every organization is facing a shortage in developers. So the time, talent, and treasure necessary to get those things done, even if the treasure is available, the time and talent aren't. And that's a difficult place to be in, and it just exacerbates all of the other challenges that are going on. And you really hit some of the things today. Delayed decision making, that jumped out at me, and fact-based and incremental or iterative approaches. This is part of the problem that we are very excited to be making forward momentum, especially for a lot of our larger financial services and energy customers, giving them the ability to put very light, fast, quickly deployed solutions in place that allow them to analyze and get facts. Because oftentimes, as you were talking about, you get the biases from users. Why we get thousands of these a week, and then if you can actually measure what they're doing, you find out it's only hundreds. But it may be very, very critical. But you get those facts, and that's where you become a strategic asset to the business, where you're helping them gather and organize and analyze the facts and make those fact-based decisions. We look at these hypotheses that you get out of those early facts, and the ability that you can do, and again, I am sort of pitching the product here for a minute, but these visual tools allow people to very rapidly do not only a solution against those requirements, but to do A/B testing and say, what if we try 2 different pathways? What if I use my creativity because I don't have that high cost of development? And again, I'm not suggesting we build mobile apps or everything out there, but for things that are business process, back office, work related, it's just so quick to get these things up that you can say, I want to try an A and a B and a C path, and then get real facts out of that and continue to iterate forward. And I loved your comments about the vision, setting a vision of what things look like when they're done. And that really led to a question that I wanted to pose back to you. High Gear as a company is very much focused on business analysts. And I think your perspective here is deep and rich. You've come from the development side all the way into the business analyst side, even writing a book, Business Analysis Best Practices for Success, which is a very impressive compendium on what people can do to be successful. And so I'd like to dip into that a little bit and say, when it comes to both setting the vision, which I think is selling the vision, and interacting with an organization that is often resistant to change, just like your example of Bank of America, Nations Bank, and other ones where they just can't wait for the change to happen, and trying to get those 2 organizations meshed sometimes into the same pot really requires BAs to have a lot of trust and a lot of influence in the organization, with executives, with stakeholders, and with developers, all the people that they've got to work with to get one of these solutions done. I wonder if you couldn't, maybe even for my benefit, share what are some of the practical ways that a junior or mid-level, or maybe even somebody who's senior but hasn't really seen themselves as a strategic resource yet, what are the practices that they can put in place to gain trust and influence in the organization, so that that clarity of vision they have as somebody who's really dug in and done the interviews can be effectively sold, articulated, and then executed in an organization?
That's a whole several hours of influences and so forth. But let me try to shortcut it here. In my experience, observation and personally doing it, and I've been in the business 54 years now, and so a lot of the things I learned, I had to learn the hard way, had to be told more than once. But one of the more successful things that I've seen, in business today, starting with school all the way through college into business, we are taught to know what we know. We're hired because of what we know. We know the answers. If we don't know the answers, we're not doing our job. So we always want to give people the answers. We don't want to give them any impression that we don't know what the answers are. And yet, the ones who have the greatest influence, the ones who are the best managers, the ones who are trusted and the people go to for advice, are the ones who, instead of answering the questions, ask them. They help people come up with solutions. Now, that requires a certain amount of humility, because in many cases that I can recall, by adopting that, and I didn't start that way. I had to have it force-fed at me, as it were. But where you will make suggestions and ask questions, somebody else might take the credit. And that's okay, because what you are doing is building that trust. People trust you more. They know that you're not going to come in and tell them what to do and tell them how it's going to be done, and this is what you know. Rather than that, you're asking them questions. You ask me a question, I will ask you, well, Vaughn, what would you do in this case? And how do you get influence? And so if you had a situation where you had to influence me to use your product, what would you do? And Now you're answering your own question. But the interesting thing is that you won't think that way. You'll think that I answered your question, even if I didn't. And therefore, you'll trust me because, after all, it's your answer, and you certainly trust yourself. So let me give you an example. I am not a very outgoing person. I'm, I can speak to audiences without any problem, but put me one-on-one and I can't do it. So we go to a party and, I'll go straight to the food table. I'll stand around the food table, have some snacks, watch, wait. And then when I figure I've been there enough, I'll go say, thank you very much, wonderful party, and get out. Right? Well, this one party, I decided I'm going to just try to see what I can do. So I sat on a sofa and some person sat next to me, guy, and he was from San Diego. He was a rare metals salesperson. He'd been there for 24 years. And I mean, my game that I was playing was only ask a question. So we were there for, 15 minutes, and I learned everything about him. And then this lady sat down on the other side and I asked her questions. And at the end, my wife and I left, and she said, well, I don't know what you were doing, but they said you were the most excellent conversationalist. You were great. And I'm thinking, I never said anything about me. People love to talk about themselves. So if you ask them questions, they will trust you and you will be able to influence them all the more.
I think that was a fantastic 3D chess answer. Well done. Yeah, I think the other question that sort of comes out of that as well is, you gain the trust, you gain the influence, you gain this really good inside track full of information about what it is that the real problem is. You've really gained a solid understanding by asking a lot of questions. How do you gain the trust as a business analyst of the executives to take new and different approaches to solving these problems? Because oftentimes they want to just, bring business analysts in and say, I just need you to figure the details out. And they're not necessarily bringing them in to say, I want you to re-architect or rethink this. So drilling in specifically towards the executives, maybe you've done all of that work and gained all of that influence. You've got all the stakeholders behind you, but now you've got to get management's buy-in that you're going to take a radically different approach than the organization has before. Any suggestions there? And then I know we need to get, I need to get out of the way and let the audience ask some questions. They've got to be excited to get to you.
Yeah, that's a little actually easier to answer. If you focus, now it requires, if you think strategically, even if you're fully tactical and you're involved in a project, but you think strategically, management will be influenced by you better. Get out of the requirements, get out of the user stories, get out of the code. Think in terms of, why are you doing this project overall? What is it doing for the organization? And when you present anything that you're going to present, whatever the problem is that you need resolved, you're going to give them option A and option B. You present it in terms of the goal you're trying to achieve, showing, first of all, that you understand their goal, you understand the business goal, and what can be done to achieve the goal for them. Not only will you gain more influence and probably sell what it is that you need to sell better, but management will remember you. And when it comes for upward mobility, you'll be one of the candidates because you're already demonstrating strategic thinking.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. And thank you, Vaughn, for your questions today. We're going to jump into the regular Q&A right now. And as a reminder, if you do have any questions, just type them into the questions box and I'm going to read them out to Steve. Steve, hi, Steve. Here's our first question. Do you have any best practices or recommendations for presenting gaps in growing organizations that might not have complete teams, for example, product, project, BA, support, or have similar smaller teams where certain individuals are wearing many hats and overall resources are quite constrained?
I have talked in the past about a BA being a project manager and vice versa, and wearing multiple hats, and how to deal with that particular problem. There are specific things you can do, but that is as an individual. As a company that is short on people, personnel, skills, and that is not something that is either going away, and it's certainly not going to go away soon. Not only are people changing jobs, but new skills are being required that last year we didn't need. Now we do, and they're not out there. You know, data analytics skills and AI skills and machine learning and so forth, from the business side as well as the technical side. So there will be a gap on the consistent gap. Now, I'm not sure whether you're asking from the perspective of the business, what the business does to close the gap, or from the perspective of you are in that gap and unable to bridge it. In the latter case, once again, I hate to sound like the broken record, but if you are keeping in mind the overall goal, what it is that you need to accomplish, the vision of where you're going to go. I understand this is where we need to be. Many times, the tactical decisions that involve perhaps not enough people or missing something here can be put into the context of that overall goal, the long-term view of things. And as such, it doesn't anymore have the importance, the pressure, the stress that it might have when you look at it from the big picture. I'm not sure if that's quite what you're asking in terms of what the gap. If not, ask another question.
Thanks, Steve. And Andrew, just use another question if Steve didn't answer at all. Our next question: what techniques or diagrams help a business analyst model and align their project with strategic goals?
UML and the even your BPMN tend to be more detail oriented. Use cases similarly. User stories at the high level, the epics and so forth, can be more strategic in orientation. But by the time they get down to the level that we're working on them with the team, with the developers, they're broken down so that we can get them done in a small amount of time. So they're no longer strategic. The types of, they're not really diagrams, but more analytical processes. SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. SWOT analysis, pestle analysis, Zachman analysis. The analysis at the high level that can be brought down. You can do a SWOT on a project if you want. Those are the kinds of analyses we do. Mind maps, customer journey maps, empathy maps for personas. These are things more at the goal. One of the common aspects of strategic diagramming, if such a thing exists, is that they are focused on the business. So we can create, look at your corporate website, your annual reports. It usually lists the strategic goals that the company is going to be going after in the next fiscal year. That's what you want to, so can you take that goal, put it at the end of the whiteboard, and draw a map from the other end of the whiteboard to the goal? What needs to be done? And that's just a diagram of your strategic goals, the strategies to get there. In doing that, you might find a dozen paths going, just like driving across the states or any country. There are a dozen different ways of going there. Some scenic, some direct, some are the highway, some are the byway, but you can get there. Any one of them will get you there.
Thanks, Steve. Our next question, what would you say to a BA where the business isn't involved in the business solution? There is no representation on the business side. How can a BA be successful?
Wow. I think that I would be asking a lot of questions. The fact that they're not represented, no one's stepping forward and saying, I'm representing the business, is not that overly unusual. It would be for today, I think, but I've been in that situation. And the reason is they assume that the business analyst is going to be their representative. As I mentioned, the business analyst is looked at as the customer representative on the solution team. They represent the business. So, hey, I don't want to take anybody off my line. You know, I don't want to pull my accounts payable clerk off. Let the business analyst take care of that. That means that the business analyst then has to be more business than IT, even if you're working for IT, which most business analysts today are. Back in the mid 90s, when I started working with business analysts, most of the business analysts work for the business side. So you're going to be more on the business side. You're going to represent, which means you're going to be going asking questions, a lot of questions. Even if you know, you're pretty sure you know the answers, ask anyway. Eventually, you will become that representative of the business. And that's good for you too, because the more you know about the business, the more likely it is that they will trust you and they will give you more.
Thanks, Steve. Our next question, what is the best method concerning having community agency and collaboration? It's a little bit, if you need a little bit more information, we can ask Nick to provide it.
Well, again, you're talking about, well, I could spend a whole day talking about all sorts of different aspects of collaboration and so forth. There's a book by Patrick Lencioni called Getting Naked. And I kind of mentioned some of the themes in that book earlier, but the idea is that you want to ask questions. And the more question you ask, the more people get involved. They have to provide answers and you're committed to your answers. And the more you involve the people with planning. As I said, I had a project. I was put on as a project manager and I had to get the project plan written and approved before they would even give me the team. I was a consultant. And so I wrote what I thought was a great project plan, and it was rejected by the committee. I rewrote it, it was rejected again. I rewrote it and they accepted it. So I go in on Monday morning and I meet my team for the first time. There's a copy of the project plan in front of everybody. I decided that wasn't going to work because these guys are not involved with the project. They're being given the project, and you know what that's like, where you're told this is what you're going to do. Here's the template you have to use. Here's the plan. Follow the plan. So I took the plan that I had written, and they all knew I'd written because that's the policy of the company. And I was very dramatic. I ripped the plan up into little pieces and threw it up in the air and said, I don't know who wrote this stupid plan. That is terrible. Let's write a new one. Let's write it the way we want to do it. And it took a little bit, they didn't believe me. But finally, we all got involved with writing the plan. The plan didn't deviate too far from what I had, but there were some differences, but they were involved in it. The collaboration grew while they were writing the plan. We went through forming and storming and almost into norming. We created a team, and all the players, all the participants of that team became involved in planning and therefore committing to the plan because it was their plan. They were very collaborative, the whole team from then on. And I've never done that again. It just kind of stands out, that one instance, because I never did another project for that company. So that's the idea. Get everyone involved, the whole team involved in what you're doing. Ask them questions, ask for their advice, ask for their counsel. Instead of saying, this is what you're going to do, say, I don't know what we're going to do. What do you think? And you will find that you are building collaboration, you're building cooperation, you are definitely building community.
Thank you, Steve. Our next question, how to deal with situations where the business goal is changing too fast?
Wow. Given that situation, and I certainly have been in that situation because I've had a couple of my own companies and our goals kept changing constantly. The first one I tried is because I didn't know much. I was learning as I went, so it was constantly changing. So my advice here and counsel is find out why. Without challenging, without saying, wait a minute, you said this before and now you're saying this. Ask why. Well, what are we doing now? What is the goal now? How does that differ from what we were doing before? Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm on board with this. If you understand why they're changing the goals so much, you may be able to come up with ways of assisting achieving the goals. Usually it's because goal A didn't work, so I'm going to switch to goal B, and that's not working, so I'm going to switch to goal C. Maybe by asking questions and getting them to think about the goals, you might be able to get them closer to those goals, but certainly you'll be able to understand, and maybe it's not as wide a range as you thought. They aren't really changing the goals, but maybe just changing their perspective. Sometimes it's just a matter of understanding what's behind it.
Excellent, Steve. I think we only have time for one more question today. To what extent does strategic thinking support changing business behaviors to innovate and embrace change?
Yeah, there is kind of a implication in strategic thinking that you get the goal and you stay to it. You keep your eyes on the prize, so you don't want to change. But that's kind of the people who don't do strategic thinking say, I don't want to do strategic thinking because it locks me in. I can't be innovative. But actually, it's the opposite is true. The whole concept of hypothesis thinking, the whole concept of coming up with alternate solutions, of being ready to change at a moment's notice, that you can't. You've got to be willing, first of all, to fail. And that means that I'm going to try something and it doesn't work. And I'm going to try something else and it doesn't work. Can you imagine being in your company right now and you do something and it doesn't work? And instead of people saying, okay, who did this? Whose fault is this? Why didn't you think about this before you did it? Instead of that, they say, hey, great, that eliminates one possibility. Good, nice job. Let's move on to the next. Kind of a design thinking approach. Eliminating possibilities, as in the scientific method. Coming up with a number of hypotheses and eliminating them, which means that it's a constant change. Is this going to work? No, let's try this. But what makes it good, what makes it real, what makes it successful, generates the benefits, is that we have our eyes on that prize. We know what the goal is we're trying to achieve, whether that is increasing revenue by 20%, expanding our business, picking up market share. Whatever that goal is, we keep that goal in mind, remembering that if the roadway ahead, the bridge is out, we can take another road, but we know where we're going. We can change all we want and still end up at the same place that we want to be.
Excellent, Steve. And we are running out of time right now. So Steve, again, I'd like to thank you for such a great presentation. We'd also like to thank High Gear for sponsoring today's event. And of course, thank you all for attending today's Modern Analyst webinar. We'd like to remind everyone that today's webinar, along with the slides, will be archived at the ModernAnalyst.com website within one business day. This concludes today's event. We hope everyone has a great day. And again, Steve, thanks for such a great presentation.
Well, thank you.